afternoon, everybody. My name is Abby Lehman with L3 Harris Geospatial, and I'd like to welcome you to this live episode of Geospatial Distancing. This is the first of back-to-back episodes featuring panelists from Esri, and we're going to be talking about the geospatial industry and what it's like to work in it beyond the upheaval that came with COVID. Now, if this is your first time joining one of our shows, you'll notice that we run it a little bit differently than the typical webinar you might be familiar with. As I said last week, I like to say that we are the webinar's cool aunt. You know, we're laid back, we're informal, and we'll let you get away with almost anything when your parents aren't looking. Before we dive into the conversation today, let me introduce our guests. First up is Beau Legeer. He is from the Esri imagery and remote sensing team, and used to work with him also, I did. He's worked his way up through the geospatial industry for over 25 years, but he will always be a geek at heart because no matter how high he climbs that career ladder, his coding chops might get rusty, but they will never be broke. Say hello to our audience, Beau.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today.
Next, we are joined by two of my current L3 Harris colleagues. We're joined by Zach Norman, who is back for his second geospatial distancing appearance. He is a product manager currently, but I remember meeting him when he started out in tech support. And back then, in his free time, he used to make little animation snippets in IDL with code, because I guess that's just the kind of guy that Zach is. Say hello, Zach.
Hello.
And last of all, well, not last of all, I suppose, but next, we have Andrew Fore, who is not only an experienced fly fisherman, but he also manages the academic and nonprofit customer base for our North American sales team. And at the risk of sounding like a high school guidance counselor, I would put him in the category of those bright-eyed, bushy-tailed go-getters. Say hello, Andrew.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
And now, last but not least, the smart, blonde, popular girl you always wanted to be friends with, my marketing colleague, Matria Grazing. Say hello, Matria.
Hello.
Now, Matria is here, as she is every week, to monitor your questions as you submit them throughout the webinar. And she will direct them to our panelists, and they can answer your questions live on air. Remember that anyone in our live audience can submit questions to our panelists using the Q&A button along the bottom of your screen. You can do that at any time, and we encourage you to do so. Now, onto the conversation. So as the world starts to transition its focus from COVID response to COVID recovery, we're in an industry where many people went from being office regulars to remote workers nearly overnight. And so there's a unique challenge there when you talk about a workforce that consumes and processes as much data as we do. So I want to start off the discussion with Beau because he proposed this topic. Beau, do you want to provide some insight into your thoughts on this topic when you pitched it to us?
Yeah, Abby, my thoughts are that, over the years in the geospatial industry, our workflow has remained relatively consistent, even though we have tried very hard to embrace new technologies. A lot of us still, prior to COVID, we're coming into the office, downloading data, putting data on our desktops or on servers inside of our organizations, and consuming our data that way for image analysis and exploitation. And, for once we, for the first time, we really had a forcing function, and that was everybody go home. And that forcing function said, your data can't be on your worktop or your work desktop PC with lots of power and lots of space. You weren't going to be able to do that because you were at home. And, my thought was around, hey, how do we get through this? And what I've seen in the last couple of months is I've seen people go at home and still able to perform geospatial analysis and successfully do it. And we're starting to embrace new technologies. And I really thought it was amazing because I think what's happening now is we're coming out of the really strict lockdowns now and realizing that life did go on, business did continue. We were able to do our analysis, with similar vigor and with similar results. And my thought process around this was, is this the new normal? And can we expand upon this? Can we start to really embrace data sources and analysis techniques and patterns that don't require us to be in the office, that can be done remotely on hardware that we have at home. And what's that going to take? And what does that mean for the data sources, you know, and the providers? How are they going to respond to this, and how can we help them? So those are my thoughts, Abby. I really, I think we've come through this this really strict period really well. I see people continuing to do analysis. I see people embracing new technologies. You know, I'm really excited, and I'm really glad to have this conversation and to explore these topics further.
So Beau, here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, apart from geospatial, you know, thinking a little bit more specifically about remote sensing and, you know, rasters and imagery and just being really large data sets, do you see this as an opportunity for people to actually take the plunge into the cloud? You know, a couple of years ago, everybody was talking cloud, 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 and I don't think that many people really did much in the cloud. I mean, it sounds like, or seems like this is a great time to really try to transition so that you can access data and keep doing the things you were doing.
Yeah, Zach, I think it's happening because it has to happen, and you know, the cloud is available anywhere, so it's a great place for data to put, or for organizations and providers to put data in, and for people to consume it. And it doesn't require, you know, significant hardware. It just requires comms. And you know, we're all very lucky, I think, that when we were sent home because of the pandemic, we were sent home at a time where comms, for most of us, were pretty good. I mean, if this would have happened 10 years ago, I think we would have been in a much different situation. But a lot of us have infrastructure at home that we can stream videos. I mean, if we can stream videos, we can stream geospatial information from the cloud. So I think that, you know, this has forced a lot of us to embrace the cloud and see, you know, how can I actually consume data from the cloud, whether it is through my traditional desktop application or, you know, people potentially moving to web-based analysis tools.
I think it forced the hand, really, of something that the industry was trying to do for so long. I mean,
Yep.
Like you said, we just didn't really have a choice anymore. We had to make it work. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. We see that a lot with our academic customers, you know, the challenges that professors have been facing with transitioning what were historically in-person labs and teaching to those online courses that didn't already have that set up. You know, it presented a lot of different challenges for professors, whether it's working with Amazon to get the correct software on AWS, or even being able to provide the right training materials. You know, a lot of universities already had online systems, but I think a particular challenge in geospatial is there were a lot of in-person labs that still, you know, hadn't moved their software either to the cloud or, you know, online. An example is, you know, Penn State University was forced to go to all ARC online for the most part during this, you know, pandemic, and that exactly, you know, forced their hand. So, you know, just adapting to the challenges and speeding that process up a little bit.
And I think I'm really interested in like, you know, this was kind of an emergency situation. And so we kind of just made do, and we kind of put some Band-Aids on the issue and made sure that people could work from home temporarily, that kind of thing. But how do you extend that, you know, if people decide that they want to keep working at home, or if offices reduce office space, that kind of stuff? You know, what needs to happen in order for that to be realistic?
So,
Or whatever.
so somebody asked a question, you know, why not just be using remote computers? So, you know, taking a step back, and when I think about cloud or enterprise, I think there's, you know, a couple different levels. And the probably easiest way that anybody, you know, can really get into cloud or remote processing is just using a remote desktop instance. You could do that, you know, up on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, and just remote in and be close to your data. If it's up there, you know, maybe it's, you know, Sentinel data sets or something like that. But I think, you know, that's a great and easy starting point for some of this. I mean, we even do that internally sometimes. We did some of that beforehand because we have access to, large machines or GPUs if you're doing deep learning. And so, I don't know, maybe there's not too much change from, the way I guess we operate sometimes, which is we use that infrastructure before as needed, and we probably will, continue to do that as we go forward.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the comment, the chat pop up, that, for some person in our audience, Marion, her job requires, heavy duty storage capacity. And that's what we're talking about here. This is geospatial data. It's humongous.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have a home solution. So she just can't do her real job right now. I mean, that's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable.
Yeah. And for, you're kind of step into the world of not being in the office and not having that access is the remote desktop experience. And, unfortunately it's not ideal for some of the, the visualization workflows we do. Even though the technology and the bandwidth gets faster, a lot of us pan and zoom and roam through very large data sets stored on those, on that heavy duty storage. I mean, and remote desktop experience can get you there, but I think, this situation is going to force us to start to think about, okay, moving those huge heavy data sets off of, say, local or shared storage into a cloud and consuming with services so that, your visualization and your analysis can just leverage that data wherever you are, because it's on highly available remote storage that you can access from anywhere. So I think the remote desktop is a great step because it's a familiar thing for a lot of people, and licensing, which is always an issue here, of some technology is taken care of because you're pretty much accessing the same desktop or similar desktops that you're used to. So it's a baby step, but eventually I think, getting into new patterns that really embrace large data remote storage are a good goal for us. And those of us that were there already probably didn't slow down during this period because they just shifted their location from one one location to the other using the same web browser, if you will.
But here's a question for you. So when you were just talking about visualization and services, I guess in particular, are you thinking more kind of automated processing on the fly, just streaming the data to look at it? The reason I ask is because, for a lot of people, if they're in the audience and, say some of our remote sensing scientists, where one of the reasons where it's, really great to have the data locally on your machine is because you can do whatever you want with it. You can quickly generate different products, see what those look like, tweak results, and it's just a different user experience when you have a web application. It's not as, you don't necessarily have as much control as you do with some heavy desktop client.
Yeah, it's true that, the web clients are not quite, they don't have all the tools that the desktop clients do for that type of ad hoc analysis that you're talking about. Although they're getting there. I mean, the core technologies like WebGL are really starting to increase the visualization experience that you get on the web. But client-side rendering tools and functions are really starting to fill a gap between the desktop and the web client experience. It used to be a couple of years ago, the web client was really great for just tile viewing. And you're right, if you wanted to do, more dynamic enhancements of data, you really either had to push that stuff server side, or you really had to go to the desktop for more, for that type of ad hoc analysis. I'm hoping that, this movement to home-based analysis or remote analysis can accelerate companies building more robust clients, so they potentially could support this. I think the technology's there. And I think it's just a matter of time before the scientist and the image scientist type of user can do as much on a client that they could do on a heavy duty desktop. And that would kind of fill the loop, because then, you combine that with back end processing that occurs on servers now, which is almost required for the types of data, the sizes of data that we have, and the types of analysis that people want to do that span beyond a single scene, and they go to multiple scenes, to citywide, county, statewide, countrywide analysis. You combine that all together and you can build a complete solution for that ad hoc analysis down to that really large scale analysis, all based on just sitting at home on your web client.
And one of the poll questions that we asked of the audience was, where are you primarily storing and accessing the data that you need to do your work right now? And really, it's about equal almost people that are using a big brick of an external drive and cloud storage, but overwhelmingly, people are using, VPNs or remote servers, that kind of thing. And that brings up something else as a concern that, we've had a few questions about, which is, how do you deal with the cybersecurity around something like that, and what changes need to happen there?
Maybe just a little comment. So like for us, or even just thinking about like the government, from security, there's public clouds and like the government clouds, so that you are essentially, cordoned off from the rest of the world if there are threats. And at some level, you're probably going to have difficulties no matter what, if you have sensitive data or sensitive analytics or processing that need to take place in a controlled environment. That's just going to limit your options. And you might have to stay on premise or go into SCIFs or whatever, secured or cleared environments you have to be in, just because that's the rules and regulations around the data that you have. So there might not be a great solution for those types of applications, but just, from the commercial aspect with, data vendors, how much data is out there and publicly available, for most, maybe a majority of customers or users, I guess, not customers, there are, connected solutions that they can access today. And maybe just one thing to add from what you're saying, Beau, I'm a programmer, and, Beau, I know you're a programmer as well. I don't know how much you get to do anymore, but over the past 5 years, it has been pretty phenomenal how many new libraries and technologies there have been for things like web developments, like TypeScript, React, Angular, and WebGL hardware acceleration, so that you do have better and enhanced viewing experiences in a browser compared to how powerful some desktop applications can actually be.
Yeah, and Abby, to kind of to react to your question, the type of security that that seems to be out there in the commercial world with other applications like Office and some of the other tools that people use around our industry, Office, Salesforce, other tools that those have shown that with single sign-on applications, two-factor authentication, things can be relatively secure. And I think that if our industry starts to embrace the type of strong authentication, single sign-on, we can start to follow the lead of other parts or other industries that are being successful, and hopefully remove the need for VPNs, so that we can have people in systems with user credentials that get them in there securely, and then the world opens up. And the cloud vendors that we work with a lot, they are really focused on security, and we can bake that into our solutions in the geospatial industry, where we are securely accessing their data. So I think we need to look at what other people are doing successfully and just see how we can apply that to our industry and make it a similar experience, maybe even through the similar technologies that exist out there, like Okta, where you have a kind of a single sign-on portal where you can get to your geospatial analysis with a authentication the same way you get to your Microsoft Outlook. And they are just, you know, similar experiences for you, and you don't even, you know, you can feel secure.
Yeah, and Andrew, I'm wondering too, in terms of like the nonprofits and the academics industry that you work with, are there any specific challenges that they face, whether it's, you know, funding to upgrade this stuff, you know what I mean? Like, what are the challenges that they are running into?
Yeah, no, I think there's a variety of challenges going on. One of the main challenges I've been hearing about is, you know, the short-term funding issues for changes to software. So professors that are running, you know, a summer lab or programs that require, you know, people to come into the lab, do all their work like they would historically, all of a sudden having to, you know, purchase, you know, EC2 instances and getting on AWS very quickly is a challenge in universities because of the, you know, procurement processes and the hierarchies where you have to get, you know, move your way up the ladder, and that can take time. So that has definitely been frustrating and challenging. You know, one piece of feedback I've gotten from, you know, the education industry is that there are a lot of great things happening with the support that companies are providing right now. So the open data access and the ability of a lot of geospatial companies to get licensing out quickly and so they can install and keep their work going has been very impressive across the board from what I've been hearing. And, you know, a lot of students have been having a great time, especially, you know, with our software and, you know, our GIS. So that's a, you know, definitely a challenge, but stuff that's overcome. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the professors have to deal with these challenges and their colleagues in IT just to get this stuff up and running.
Yeah.
In a short term.
I imagine with how tight budgets are in academia, you know, every dollar counts, and you have to start paying monthly fees for accessing cloud computing infrastructure instead of just like a single expense for computers for labs that, you know, last for years. I imagine that that's quite a shift even just from how they would need to spend money or create budgets for spending money, because it's more of a regular occurring expense instead of one they expect every couple of years.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And with, you know, a lot of budgets there, you know, you can get grant money or you can, you know, you get your yearly budgets, and with the timing of COVID-19 and everything, a lot of that money, you know, have been spent on renewing subscriptions, you know, for the desktop licensing. And after that money's spent, there's not a lot left over to do this, you know, to fill these immediate needs. So, you know, the fact that the industry did step up and was flexible and understanding, you know, is great. And, you know, that should be the standard. And from what I've been seeing in other industries as well, that's happening across the board. So it's, you know, it's understanding and just wanting to help people become successful.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to pause for a second because I know we had a bunch of questions pop up. Matria, do you want to relay some of those to our panelists?
Yeah, so we did have some more technical questions. So someone did ask, when setting up remote access to Linux workstations, you know, do you recommend RDP or VNC protocols?
Wow, that's technical.
Yeah, that's very specific there, Matria.
She's asking
Personally,
herself.
I'll say
Nobody
what
asked a question. She just wants to know.
I do.
What I use myself, I use X2Go to remote into a deep learning server that I use that's actually on our network. So it's not up in the cloud, but that's how I do remote desktop. Plus, if you're using Linux, you know, maybe you're a little more tech savvy and SSH is good enough, and you just use a command line or a terminal.
Yeah, I would say it really depends on, you know, what you're going to do with that Linux server. If you're going to run a desktop like a windowing desktop there, you know, that's one you would use one thing. If you're just going to do some, like, you know, shell commands, you're like administering a web server or something. Yeah, I mean, SSH, the most secure you can get, and you know, it's all going to be, you know, what's the most secure thing you can do in either one of those environments.
So another less technical question, what happens when software that you're using every day is on one computer in the office and not on, everyone's individual computers to be able to take them from home? How do you deal with that? In trying to navigate the new, work from home.
I'm guessing, and Beau, I don't know the answer to this question, but I think that you guys at Esri have done something similar. Like, I mean, I know we did like a work from home license, so then you could just get a license and put it on your personal machine at home. And I'm guessing you guys at Esri did something like that as well to let people.
Yeah, Esri was supporting some work from home initiatives. Throughout the various industries, working directly with customers to see, how they could best support home use licenses. A lot of Esri customers have that access, already. But if they didn't, they were just asked to work with their, individual contacts there and figure out the way. Yeah, but that seems to be, kind of what's, what the best thing in that situation is, try to get home use access. And I think this situation will really start to impress upon us in the industry the need to kind of set rules and bake in some policies on the onset for home use, just in case things have to go, just in case we have to, rapidly shift to a different work environment. That the thing we all have to consider there is your home system capable of running, software like NV or ArcGIS if you get a home license? And that's, that's something we all have to think about going forward. Or are you able to just bring your laptop home? In the case where you have the licensed software on a computer at home that everybody logs into, or a computer at work and people log into, yeah, that's a tough situation. I mean, one that I think has to be dealt with home use licensing or something like that.
Yeah, and Beau, you touched on this a little bit at the beginning. That it goes beyond just getting people the internet, connectivity they need and that kind of thing. But also it's an infrastructure issue too. I mean, it goes beyond just like what our companies are able to do, There's a few companies I think that are probably doing it better than others. Any of our panelists, do you have some examples of companies or organizations, software, whatever you've been working with, that you're seeing some of the right things come out of there?
Well, any organization that embraces a SaaS model, software as a service, they're going to be the most flexible because all you really need is a web browser. And so your infrastructure needs are that web browser, web connection. Companies like Salesforce, and you can run Salesforce anywhere. You can run it on your mobile. You can run it on your web browser. Now that doesn't do heavy duty geospatial analysis. It doesn't stream data in. So, SaaS-based offerings that do that are something we're going to have to think about in our industry. Can we shift things that traditionally happen on desktop to software as a service, the analysis, the visualization, and embrace that model? Because then we fall into the same category of somebody like Salesforce, easy to use at home.
What's it been like for you, Andrew, to work at home? Have you had the connectivity you need and it's been a simple transition?
Yeah, no, it's been a fairly simple transition. I've had good connectivity. I've been able to get the resources I need. I think the biggest challenge has just been some of the communication that you used to get in the office and face to face. That's of course everyone communicates differently, and some people like it more than others. But I did find that one of the things I missed. But I love working from home now. I'm a big fan of it. I can get everything I need to get done. But kind of creating a hybrid of maybe work from home 4 days a week, come in the office 1 day a week, connect with colleagues, and all that kind of stuff is something that would be ideal for me going forward. So,
The
but
poll-
I'm not a student at the same time. So I've known, you know, a student of professors that had not had as smooth of a transition. So my experience is definitely different because I'm not an actual, scientist or analyst doing some of this more, big data processing, like Beau mentioned, and it's different for everyone. I think that might have a different application or program or something like that. So that's one thing I've tried to be understanding about is just because it's going well for me does not mean it's going well for most people, and how can we react to that and support that in the best way possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
Andrew, you brought up a good point, which came up from your poll question, Abby, that you just sent out.
that I was going to mention just now. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, did I steal your thunder? Oh,
Please
so sorry.
do.
Yeah, the inability to meet or interact face to face as the biggest challenges from working remote. I mean, product management, a big part of my job is communication. And so every day when I would go in, I'd walk around the building and talk to all the team leads and people who I needed to. And it's, you have to be a lot more active. You can't be passive about working remotely. You have to make the decision to engage and talk to people. Because otherwise, if you're quiet, other people will be quiet too. And, everybody gets off the same page. And it's just different ways of working.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just one last thing, Abby. I have noticed though, Zach and Andrew, that in the past I had many Zoom meetings, at least one or two a day, even when we were working in the office with remote colleagues and customers. But ever since we went home, everybody turns their camera on, and that's that's something. That's something that's different, so that at that level, sometimes there is a little more engagement, and we all kind of feel this collective spirit of, hey, we're all in this together, and let's at least see each other and try to have some interaction.
Well, and those are high level things too, I think, that we definitely want to address next week when we have Richard on, because he's going to be focused on this topic, but from a leadership perspective, how do you accommodate the rest of the working stiffs like us, that need to be able to do their work remotely. So that should be a good one as well. Matria, do you want to direct another question from the audience?
Yeah, well, more of just a comment, because it looks like, the second biggest thing is the distraction of, you're home, you have your partner there with you have your kids, so now you're shifting from, being teaching your kids from home and trying to, keep them entertained and getting everything done that they need to get done depending on their age, plus trying to get your, your workload done. Has that been a challenge for you, Beau, as far as trying to wrangle kids, have them hogging all the bandwidth at home, watching Netflix or?
Oh yeah. I mean, that is probably the hardest thing. There's, I have multiple kids that we're doing remote learning at various levels, and they're on video, they're watching YouTube videos or they're streaming, and I'm trying to upload a very large file to S3. And so the main distraction was somebody coming down saying, "What are you doing?" Which means I was winning. I was getting the bandwidth. But the worst was, the S3, the AWS S3 upload speeds were, cratering. So, that prevented me from getting data up to Amazon, which I would use to publish out a service or something. So, there were challenges around just mechanics of working, but also the distractions of, please help me. I did notice myself and other colleagues that were in similar situations really flexed our hours, and working at night, early in the morning. And it does seem a little less difficult, because there isn't a drive involved. There is a commute to work. You just go to your office at 6 p.m. and put in 4 hours, and sometimes, you get better internet speed. So yeah, it's a challenge, but there's a lot of flexibility that also comes along with it.
Zach, Andrew?
I just have a little dog that is not too much work. So, you know, she's not streaming anything on Netflix. So, you know, it's pretty easy to keep getting my job done. You know, on the commute piece, I love not having to commute, although I only lived about 1.5 miles away from the office, so I didn't really have a commute anyways. But, you know, it's really, you just wake up, walk over to my desk and get to start work.
It's weird because I was working remotely prior to this. And myself and a colleague that also was working remotely prior to this, it's been kind of a trip to see all of a sudden everybody thrust into the same position of like, if your computer breaks, like, how are you going to call IT? How are you going to contact them? How are you going to send them an email? You know, these are the things that people don't really have to think about usually. Suddenly they're faced with the new problem.
Yeah, I definitely seen that in the academic community a lot, with helping, you know, students. So I have a friend that's going back to get his PhD, and he was excited. We were talking before this all started because he thought this COVID shutdown would present an opportunity to get a lot of deep research done that he wanted to do on a personal level. And, you know, we were talking about how Isaac Newton, you know, came up with calculus during the plague in London. And, you know, we were talking about, okay, so what great things are going to come out of this? And I think it's turned out to be more of a mixed bag for a lot of people because of the challenges, kids, more administrative responsibilities with having to coordinate between teams and all these things that have come up that kind of change that expectation of, oh, I'm working more, but I'm not actually getting all that, you know, those kind of side projects done that I was looking forward to when I'm at home. And, you know, my understanding of it from talking to people is it's not turned out in that kind of way that people thought it would, but, you know, that's how I think a lot of these challenges go.
Well, I think you touched on something that, you know, has been kind of a common thread amongst all of our episodes, which is, you know, this may be a time for like really rapid innovation. Just because people are kind of stuck where they are. And like you said, Isaac Newton coming up with things during the plague in London. You know, what do you think that next generation is going to look like of innovations? Like if you guys had to imagine, like, what is the one thing that you could just wish it into existence that would make your life easier working remotely right now? What would it be?
Oh, well, I wish somebody would come up with the technology within, you know, a web-based conferencing platform like Zoom or Teams that was more three-dimensional. And so it would actually feel like you're sitting at a meeting table and you can look around and see people. I think that's probably the next innovation because this 2D gallery world that we're in is pretty awful. And of course, I would love to see that technology then transition to our industry. I mean, our industry is getting really good with 3D data, especially on the, you know, especially in web-based analysis of 3D data. I see 3D web scenes that just blow my mind in the clarity because I know what it takes to display that, and they're just coming over the web into web browsers seamlessly. So can we transition, you know, 3D meetings with 3D analysis and maybe some touch and feel and move things around? I mean, that's been kind of a goal in our industry for a long time, is more immersive analysis. I would think that the industry that touches everybody, which would be this video conferencing industry, could lead the way, and then we could follow and take their technology and use it for immersive analysis instead of immersive meetings.
Yeah, I mean, last week, not last week. Go ahead. You know what, Zach? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. To say, you know, your 3D meetings, it makes me think of, you know, Star Wars with the Jedi Council.
Absolutely.
Sitting on chairs with holograms and everything.
Yeah. Yep.
We can have an avatar. I'll have an avatar that looks like we'll have supermodels as avatars, things like that.
Yeah, but, you know, think about it, Zach. I mean, if we can paint and create, you know, digital twins, you know, these photorealistic scenes of urban landscapes from drones and from satellite imagery and aerial imagery, we can do that with a human too, right? Just with a couple more cameras. in a conferencing situation. So it would actually look better than the Jedi Council because it wouldn't look so hologrammy. So yeah,
maybe they need to, decimate the appearance a little bit. Can't look too real. Be a little bit trippy if it looks like the real thing. Right?
a few less polygons for you, Zach.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the polygon. So that's actually what I was going to mention was that on the last episode when we had Stuart on, he was talking about just video game engine technology, and the advancement there is crazy because they've had to kind of deal with that same challenge of like, how do you get huge amounts of data and a huge polygon count? How do you reduce it so that you can improve the quality and people can still be able to play games online and not have it just lagging horribly? And it kind of goes back to that thing of how do we package the data? Beau, you and I were talking about, is there a different way to package the data? I'm a photographer, so we were talking about, right now what the workflow looks like. It's moving from the old, which is that you remove that, that memory card, and then you have to plug it into your computer, and then that's where you do all of the analysis. And of course, it's moving to a world where everything is mobile. Do you see any of those kind of solutions going forward for our industry?
Oh yeah, drones, drones and aircraft. So right now your workflow for the drone primarily is you fly, you take with a above consumer grade drone, you fly, you have a card, you put that card in your computer, you upload to your web-based or desktop-based processor. There's no reason why that drone can't transmit to a ground station, in the cloud, and the processing occurs before the drone even lands. That's one thing. Same thing with with aerial collects. It's happening with satellites. The processing at ground stations and cloud-based ground stations are out there. They're happening. But I would see that coming down to, the drone level, which are going to be pervasive, and that will greatly improve the time from collection and acquisition to actual actionable information.
Just to tug on that thread a little bit, there's been a handful of proposals that I've seen lately that are talking, not about ground stations at all, but actually just onboard processing, so that you process the data in situ and then you only deliver the results. So then you have less data that you actually need to, provide or, get to the downstation, rather than waiting for gigabytes and gigabytes of data if it's, some vector output or something. And that's where I think stuff gets really interesting because of all the advances with machine learning and deep learning, which really enable you to do some of that automated processing where, that was, really hard to do. I mean, 5 years ago when I started in all of this, machine learning, deep learning, they were, buzzwords, and now people are actually solving problems and, creating whole pipelines with automation using deep learning, which is, like a whole nother new industry compared to a couple of years ago.
Okay, so Zach, we're on to you now. So what is your magical technology that would make your life easier right now?
All right, so magical technology. So tying into deep learning and what you're talking about with 3D. So one of the really cool things that they're doing with gaming actually is machine learning for enhancing data quality and upscaling rendering. So like if you have a 4K monitor, it can take your scene from your game and use artificial intelligence to upsample that to 4K rather than processing the whole scene at a higher resolution. And so, like if you have satellite imagery, high resolution satellite imagery might be 30 or 50 centimeters, but you really start to see, cool and interesting details when you get to maybe 15 or 7.5 centimeters. You can resolve a lot more features just with that change in resolution. But because we don't collect data that way, is actually having algorithms that do that super resolution. So there's some out there, but probably don't, or they're probably just tuned really for traditional RGB. not necessarily like hyperspectral or lots of multispectral bands. So maybe that's what I'd say is super resolution technology.
And we're getting close to our time limit, but I do want to give Andrew the chance also to answer the same question.
Yeah, mine is going to be a little more boring compared to Zach's, but mine would be, all focused around communication technology. So, similar to Beau in that, 3D meeting space, anything that can help me understand how, someone is feeling about something a little better, or help me pick up on some cues that you don't get to see over the phone, or, sometimes just a Skype meeting where you can't see someone's face. I think, Zoom is a great technology. A lot of the communication technologies out there are just amazing. Slack, all that stuff. But if I were to have an ideal piece of software to help me out right now, it'd be a communication software that enhance meetings combined with other sources of communication too. So a customer can reach me in a different way outside of our meeting, or I can distribute content through a communication platform like that all kind of had an all-in-one package, which I'm sure there's stuff coming close and that, but that's where I stand from that.
See, I was right. You are a go-getter. That's a good answer. Very good answer.
Andrew always provides good answers.
I know. So we're reaching our time limit for today. I want to thank all of our guests. Beau, thanks for taking the time out of your day to come on here. Andrew and Zach, thank you as well, although I think you're under a bit more pressure to make the time to come on in your cases. Definitely remember to join us next week. Like I said, it's going to be the second part of this back-to-back where we have Richard Cook come on, and he's going to be talking about the same topic, but from a geospatial leadership perspective that's a little bit unique there. You can register to be part of that live audience, and of course, you can watch previous recordings like this one at harrisgeospatial.com/geospatial distancing. And until next time, or next week, I guess, I want you to consider that one of the biggest differentiators between heroes and villains is the ability to extend the reach of your empathy beyond the walls of your own living room. All right, guys, have a good rest of the week and a weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.